Hello everyone! Today I'm wrapping up all of the books I read in March. Thanks, forgive me, I clearly sound sick. I don't know if I'm projecting that on camera, but either way, I have a cold, it's affecting my throat, sound, sorry. It happens to the best of us. Number two, so if you didn't know, in March I decided to tackle a genre, and that is adult fantasy. I decided to read only adult fantasy in March, and I had 5 books that I wanted to read. Spoiler warning, I read them all. And I wanted to document, my journey of reading these 5 books. So I do have 2 reading vlogs. Hopefully the second one is up, if not, coming very soon, that really document what I felt while reading those books, while finishing them, and things like that. So if you want a more in-depth discussion on all these books, I would highly recommend checking out those reading vlogs. I do have 2 book reviews on 2 of the books I'm talking about today. If you want more, let me know. I'd be more than happy to do so. But either way, like I said, I had 5 books I wanted to read. I read all 5 of them. All of them I gave either 4 or 5 stars, so there you go. They're all adult fantasy. There's one kind of adult horror sci-fi, but still, I guess, within the fantasy realm. I don't know. But either way, as always, I'm going to start with my least favorite book, working up to my favorite. These are all kind of categorized within the 4 stars, of like lower 4 star to like high 4 star, even though I'm just calling it 4 stars because I've gotten rid of half stars. Whoa, long-winded. You don't care about that. So, first up, I have Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. This is a very classic fantasy book. A lot of people talk about this book. It is a standalone as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. I think he might continue on in the future. This is basically all about a character named Richard who has a very mundane London life. He has a London job. He has a fiance that he's just really kind of horrible, and he just does the 9 to 5, doesn't have a lot of friends, that he's just kind of, going through the motions. And then he finds a girl bleeding on a street corner, and he decides to help her, and it literally changes his life. So he goes to London Below, or London Underground, where it's kind of like an Alice in Wonderland take, where there's just so many different characters. There's like rats, and there's like rat speakers, and people wearing all these coats and have different jobs, and it's just insane. So the girl he saves, named Dor, is on a mission to figure out who killed her parents, and somehow Richard gets caught up into it and discovers all about the London Underground. This was the last book that I read in March, and I think that did affect my rating because I'll be honest with you, by the end of the month, I was kind of over adult fantasy. I was just burnt out on it, and I get like that a lot when I read a particular genre, and I think it did hinder my love of this book. I did really enjoy it. It was a very whimsical, fun time, not as in-depth and not as intense and epic as the other fantasy books I've read, that is for sure. It's a more, lighter take on a fantasy, a very whimsical, I keep saying Alice in Wonderland, but that's what it reminds me of, honestly. It's just about like a different world where there's London above and there's London below. It's also kind of like a darker shade of magic with those type of Londons, if you can remember that series. Kind of gave me those feels. So overall, I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I will want to reread it when I'm more versed in the fantasy and I'm not so burnt out on it. With all of these books, at the end when I finished them, my main question was, would I say this is a good beginner fantasy book? Because I want to know that for myself, and I want to know that for you guys, because a lot of you guys have commented and said that, you were also going to try to step into the adult fantasy pool with me as well. So do I think this is a good stepping stone to adult fantasy? And the answer is yes for this one, for sure. I think it's very light and very whimsical. I would say it's a good beginner place to go because it is just a fun time. It's not like really intense. It's more of like an adventure and, going on this quest with whimsical things in it. So 4 out of 5, really enjoy it. And I'm surprised because I usually don't jive well with Neil Gaiman's work. So I'm glad to say that now I do. Next up is The Savior's Champion by Jenna Morishi. I always pronounce that wrong. This is an adult fantasy with some romance. So in case you are a person that loves a lot of romance with their fantasy, I would recommend this book. This is all about this world where it was very desolate and dark, and crops were failing. Things were just horrible until this one girl was born, and she was like glowing light, and then everything changed after that. So they dubbed her the Savior. So every time when the Savior turns 20, I believe, they do this big tournament, and men compete to win to be her husband. And then, she births, it's always a girl, she births another girl, and it's known as the Savior. So it's been happening for generations. There's been a new Savior every generation. So now we have a Savior, and she is turning 20, so there's a tournament. We follow Tobias, who does not really believe in the Savior, doesn't think it's really good, this tournament, but he enters it to help his family. And within that, he falls in love, but maybe he doesn't fall in love with the right person. Let's just say that. So overall, I really enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. It does have a lot of romance. I would say very heavy on the romance, but I'm a romance lover. I do, it's hard for me to say every fantasy book should have a romance, because I don't believe that. It depends. I like romance with my fantasy every now and then. If I want a fantasy with just no romance, that is what I'll read. If I want a fantasy with some romance in it, that's what I read. So I would say if you love romance and you love fantasy, this is a great book to read because it really talks about the romance. The world building I think was a little lackluster, which is why I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. I felt like it could have been defined a little bit more and had a little bit more structure and just learning more about it. But overall, I really enjoyed it, honestly. It was a fun time. This is very adult, not as far as sexual scenes, but as far as the men being very vulgar and horrible with their words. Like, they're dogs, okay? I'll just put it out there. They say the worst of the worst words. So just be forewarned about that in case you don't like a lot of cursing or swear words or really derogatory terms. That is a lot in here. So just, you know, as a trigger warning, just to let you guys know. But I give it a 4 out of 5. Do I think it's a good stepping stone? Absolutely. I think it reads, honestly, more new adult to me than adult, but I'm okay with that. I kind of feel like those two genres are very similar anyway. But I really liked it. 4 out of 5. Next book is one that I do have a video review on, and that is Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant. This is the adult sci-fi / horror. So technically not fantasy, but I mean, it's okay. So this is basically 7 years ago from when this plot starts, which I think is like 2022 or something like that. There was this ship and they went out to discover if mermaids are real or not. This whole company named Imagine Entertainment decided to, you know, make a documentary about it because they made a lot of documentaries about like Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and they're like, let's figure out if mermaids are real. And basically they go like near the Challenger Deep, and nobody ever comes back alive. Let's just say that. Like, nobody knows what happens. They did find footage from it that kind of proves that mermaids are real. So 7 years later, we follow a character named Tori, whose sister was actually on that boat in the past and has since died, and she wants to know answers. Why did her sister die? Like, are the mermaids real? She wants to get down to the bottom of it. She is a marine biologist, so she's been studying the ocean and the sounds of the ocean and everything like that. And basically Imagine Entertainment comes back and is like, let's go figure out what really happened. So that is what this book is all about, uncovering if mermaids are real. I really enjoyed it. This was almost a 5-star for me until I got to the last quarter, and the ending, you're either gonna really enjoy the ending or you're really gonna not like the ending at all. I did not like the ending at all, hence why it's a 4. I wanted it to be a 5 so bad because I was really immersed in this storyline of figuring out if these mermaids are real, because you have this plot of this ship that disappeared and all these people years ago, and you don't know what's really happened, and you get snippets of like interviews and books of what people speculate and things like that, but you're uncovering it as you go along. This does have a lot of sci-fi jargon in it. By that, I mean a lot of talk of the ocean, like really sonars and Dopplers and learning about the creatures and like really gritty and intense oceanography things, which if that's your jam, great. If not, like me, like science, I almost failed science a lot in high school. Okay, let's just say that. Science is not my forte. It was hard to get a hold of. I did enjoy it, but like a lot of it went over my head. So just know that in case you are like me, that just doesn't jive well with science at all. But the plot made me very intrigued, had it going forward. There were several times in this book that were very scary, very vivid, definitely kind of horror-ish as far as it goes. It's kind of a beginner / maybe intermediate sci-fi horror book, but like it didn't give me nightmares. I'll just tell you that. A lot of people said it did. It didn't give me nightmares. I'm the biggest heebie-jeebie of them all, so I don't know what you want to take from that, but overall, I give it a 4 out of 5. Really enjoyed it. Very immersive, very intense. Overall, really good time. Stuff for the last 4-star I have is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This book, the last 2 books I hear about non-stop on BookTube. If you talk about adult fantasy, more than likely if somebody gives you 5 recommendations, these 2 will for sure be on it. This one is all about a character named Kovoth. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And basically he is an innkeeper and he has a very kind of just regular job, regular life in this town. And a chronicler comes and discovers who he really is. And he's like, I traveled all this way to talk about your life story and to get your life story. So this whole book is Kovoth's life story up to a certain point. I will say it's like from him when he's like 12 to maybe like 16, 17, I forget exactly. So it's really a dissection of a character, their life story. So I like this one. I did not love it. I oh, I wanted to love it so much. And this is the one out of all of the books I read this month, I was the most nervous about reading because of that. I've heard it was slow. I heard like it's a lot of people's favorite book, like one of my friends' favorite books of all time. I was just very apprehensive, very nervous. Overall, I give it a 4 out of 5. I did really enjoy it, but it was slow. It's really, there's not a lot of plot that happens. You're just learning about Kovoth and his life story, about what happened to him, you know? And there are some parts, again, that are slow. I'll keep saying that. So overall, I give it a 4 out of 5. I did enjoy it. The writing was beautiful. I will say, if you are a character-driven reader, I love reading about the dissection of a character, learning about who they are inside and out, this is a great book for you. Now, to answer the question, do I think it's a good stepping stone from YA to adult fantasy? No. You know, I got a lot of comments that said this is a great beginner place for adult fantasy. I also got a lot of comments saying this was not a great place for beginner adult fantasies, and I would have to agree that it's not, just because of how slow it is. Now, I don't know if that's for all adult fantasies, so maybe this really is a good stepping stone. I don't know. Please take all of my advice with a grain of salt, because I'm still a very much newbie when it comes to adult fantasy. So I would say it's not a good stepping stone because there's not a lot of action, not a lot of plot. It's really kind of slowly developing. You learn about a character. So I trudged through a good middle of this. I trudged through it a lot. It was very hard for me to get through. But overall, I'm happy that I read it. Do I want to continue on with the series? Absolutely. Do I feel rushed at all? No, because the second book is out, but the third book has been rumored to come out for years and nobody knows if it ever will. So that's why I'm kind of like holding with bated breath on that. Like, I think I'll start the second book when the third book is officially going to be coming out, if that ever happens. But overall, I did enjoy it. Don't take this as me like slamming it at all. I enjoyed it. I give it a 4 out of 5. I really like reading about Kovoth and his decisions and his things like that. It does have a lot of magical elements in it as well. The magic system, I could not understand. It was a really lot over my head. Maybe I'm just a stupid reader, probably so, but it was hard for me to grasp a hold of. It was one of the more, it was very interesting magic structure, but also I could not understand it as well as I wanted to. But overall, I enjoyed it. If you're like an intermediate fantasy reader, absolutely read this. If you're just really, really diving into the genre, like just starting it anew, hold off on it until you read a little bit more. I kind of wish I did. So I need to reread this when I get a little bit more well-versed in adult fantasy. But overall, 4 out of 5, so enjoyed it. The last book I want to talk about, my favorite of the month, was Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This one I began the month with and I loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I think this is a great stepping stone from YA to a fantasy. I have a video review talking all about it, even talking about that in particular, but there are two main characters in this. One is like 16, 15, one of those, and the other one is an adult. So it could be YA, and it could be adult, whatever you want to see it as, honestly. I kind of see it more as an adult fantasy, but basically we have this world where the bad guy won. Let's just say that. The hero like failed and the bad guy has been ruling for over 1,000 years, the Lord Ruler, and it's kind of a dark, desolate place. Like, it goes out at night because mist takes over and like just ash falls down from the sky at all times. We follow two main characters, Kelsier, who is a Mistborn, and there are these people that are mistings that can swallow metals and use those metals for their advantage. Like, sometimes they can swallow a certain metal and they can really be aware of their senses and everything around them. One can enhance physical abilities, one can riot emotions, one can soothe emotions, so it's all about that. We also follow a character named Vin, who is like 15, 16, and Kelsier discovers that she's also a Mistborn, and he takes her under his wing, and the whole book is basically them trying to defeat the Lord Ruler and things like that. It's very political, very magic-based with this metal system, and I really enjoyed it. It was a great time. It is a little bit slow in the middle, but overall, I thought it started with a bang, and I thought it ended with a bang, and I really enjoyed it. I really got in love with all these characters. I won't go into more details because I have a whole video review about it, but I would highly recommend, if you were just trying to dip your toes in the adult fantasy world, I think this is a great place to start. A lot of people recommended it, and I would agree with them 1,000%. So definitely would continue on with this series, even though this broke my heart so friggin' much, but I loved it. To wrap up my feelings, I really enjoyed all the books that I read. I'm glad I pushed myself to read one genre this month, but I'm kind of over it now. Like, I'm not a person that limits myself to one genre alone during a month, so this was very hard for me. Like, I was really good up until the last week. The last week is when it hit me. Like, when I first started Neverwhere, that was my last book, I was like, I'm over this. I'm done. Like, I kind of wanted to read a light, fluffy contemporary because that's who I am. So I'm a person that reads a lot of different genres in one month. I'll read a contemporary, I'll read a sci-fi, I'll read a fantasy, I'll read a mystery. Like, I'll read all over the board. It doesn't matter to me. So for this month, when I just read adult fantasy, fantasy, like I suffered. I'm not gonna lie to you, I suffered a lot. And that's me personally. I think if you're a fantasy reader 1000%, that's great for you to do a whole month and you could probably thrive on it. I struggle with it a little bit, but overall I'm happy I did it because I thought the experience was really well worth it and I could say I did it. And I read a lot of tomes this month, like books that were over 500 pages. I think there was like 3 of them this month that I read that were over 500 pages. So I'm feeling proud of myself, but I would recommend all of them, each for different reasons. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Check out my reading vlogs if you want more details of what I thought about them while reading them and things like that. If you want another month where I read a particular genre, that'd be interesting as well. It'll be a while because I need to like take a break from some adult fantasies for a little bit. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed and thank you so much for watching. Bye.